All right, hopefully at this point you have had a chance to practice working with the general tags and building out a little theme including them. So what I'm going to do now is show you my approach to doing this, which may have been similar or different to yours. And rather than code it all out from scratch, I'm going to show you the final product. So we'll go step by step through what we wanted to include, and then I'll show you in the code how I went about doing that. So to start off, we wanted to use include tags for a header, footer, and sidebar. So let's take a look at that first. You could see here the theme that I'm working with, and you'll notice an index.php sidebar, header.php, and a footer.php. So we have those independent files, and if we open up our index.php, we can see include get header, get sidebar, and get footer. So that should pull in those files properly. And then just to take a peek in each of those, this code should look familiar. We'll get into it because it has a lot else there in addition to just pulling in the normal widget area, but it does have the dynamic sidebar, the main sidebar there. If we look in the footer, we could see the blog info tag being used. Something else we wanted to do, we'll come back to that. But most importantly, we have the WP footer, and then in the header, the body class is being used as well, but of course, WP head is what we really want to have in there. So that completes that part. We wanted to just pull in those files and make sure that we have the proper stuff in each one. So next on our list was to use blog info in your header and your footer. So let's take a look at that in action. Starting off in my header, if I come down into the site title, we could see we've got blog info name, and this is going to pull in the name of the site, and then blog info description, and this will be pulling in the description. Now, one thing that sometimes happens here is that you could use a conditional tag to check if you're on the front page, and if you are, you can maybe make this P class an H1 for the name of your site in the header, or if it's on any other page, then you make sure that it's a paragraph tag so that H1 of that actual page is being referenced, but we haven't really looked at conditional tags in depth yet, so that is something that you could have and is common to see there, but just like this, it works fine for us. So that's in the header. Then in the footer, we could see that we have copyright echo date year, so this is going to output the year as a 4-digit number, and then blog info name, so that's just giving us the copyright information there, and that will update year by year dynamically. So that could be helpful to have, and that's how we've used that in the footer. So that takes care of this one. The next one we had is add login, logout options to the sidebar. So let's jump in the code and take a look at this one. So what we could see here in the sidebar, I'm using this conditional tag that I talked about, is user logged in, and I'm saying if they're not logged in, so exclamation point means not this. So if is user logged in is set to false, then go ahead and display the login form. Otherwise, I'm using an else statement to say, go ahead and create a button. So this is a link with a button class, and echo out the WP logout URL, and I'm passing in the parameter of get permalink. So what this is going to do is return us back to whatever page we're on after we log out. Remember, WP logout URL can take a parameter of a return URL, and that is what I'm passing in here. So the URL of the current page, go ahead and return there when we log out, and then I am using this so I can translate it, and it just says log out. So let's take a look at that functionality on the front end. Oh, and then I'm ending the endif right here. So what we could see on the front end here is the login form since I am not logged in, and then if I were to log in, you could see that we are now logged in. We see the admin toolbar, and we see the log out button. And if we were to move to a different page and click log out, notice that we would still be on that same page after we logged out. So that takes care of our login, log out options. Next up, we had add a calendar to the sidebar. This is pretty basic, so we could take a look at that quickly in the code. So we're in our sidebar.php, and this is after the login information, and we can see I have an H3 here, and I'm just echoing this out to say calendar, so I have a heading above it, and then get calendar. That's all it takes, so no parameters, no anything else. And on the front end, we could see we've got our calendar. Now, I haven't really added any styling here, so we could make it look better. And of course, on your own projects, if you decide to use this widget or you decide to hard code this in, then this is something that you would definitely want to style a bit more. But that takes care of the calendar in the sidebar. The next one was an archive listing to the sidebar. So in my sidebar.php again, if I come down, I have another H3 that says archives, and then I'm just using get archives without any parameters. And we could see here that underneath the calendar, we have an archives, and then we also have another archives appearing. So that's not actually from my code. That's because I have in the widgets, the archive set up here. Now I want to point out something about the way we have this set up so that it may affect you later on. If we delete this, notice that that whole sidebar disappears. So this is an important piece of code here we have to look at. At the very top of our sidebar, it says if is active sidebar main sidebar. If it's not active, then return. So if we don't have anything in our main sidebar, then it's going to not display anything after this. So what we really want to do is remove this code from the page. And then even if we don't have anything in our widgets area, this will still work, but we could still come back in and we could add in archives right down below. You probably wouldn't do that, but just to show you that little bit. So in the sidebar, that little extra bit of code is important. Again, what we did was remove this because now we want to have code displaying whether or not this sidebar has anything in it, but we still want it to display if it is there. So we're gonna gut that out, and that will take care of this. Now you may have customized the archive listing, decide to do weekly, monthly, some other format. That's great, but we're just using it default in this example. So next we had to add archive title tags along with the archive templates. And this is something kind of important because something else comes up along the way that I wanted to show you here that wasn't covered before. So let's take a look at archive title tags along with the archive templates. So if we come into our code again, we can see we've got the archive.php and I'm using single term title. So this should make sense to you because this is what we looked at, single cat and tag all return to. So on our site, if we were to get some navigation to let us look at categories and let us look at tags, then we'll see when we click through to one of these, we should see alignment at the top and we should see WordPress at the top for this one. So that all works properly. So we have the title displaying properly, but I want to show you one other thing because remember that did not work for date archive. So if we click on date, notice it's saying month April 2017, so something a little bit different. So if we come into our date.php, notice that we are using just the archive title. We had the ability to display just monthly titles, but that won't work if you're displaying a list for a specific day. So if you want to do a year or you want to do the day, that might not work. Now, the other thing is that the archive title is an essential and very helpful tag that we could use. And if we were to put this into our archive.php page, so I'm just replacing that there, and then come look at one of the category, notice that it would then say category alignment. So if it's single term title, it's just going to display the tag. If we have the archive title, this is going to display category and then whatever, and it's going to work whether you're on a date otherwise or any other type of archive page. So it's the most generic. And when we get into filters, we could look at how to customize that. But if you don't want that there, you could just use the more specific one. Now, this is very interesting because the archive title does not show up anywhere in the docs under the general tags that we're looking at, even though it is in that file. So if we were to come back over to our list of template tags and search for this, we would not find it anywhere on the page. However, if we click into the general template.php file and then we search for it here, notice that we do get a function called archive title, and it's using get the archive title and then it's displaying anything before or after it. So that's very interesting that it appears here, but it's not in any of the documentation. So I'm not sure why that is. I just wanted to point that out here. So add the archive title with the parameters of before and after to your list, and that may be a helpful function for you as well. So you may have done archive title tags slightly differently, but just wanted to point out that to you. And finally, playing around with any miscellaneous tags. This was optional. I don't have it in the demo here, but if you did play around with that and had some luck, that's great. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. So that should give you an idea of how I went about this practice exercise. If you need to at this point, I would say practice everything again in a demo theme, so make sure that you're caught up with where we are, and then apply everything that makes sense to your own project. So you may have already used some of these tags, you may not have known all the parameters, you may not have known about some of these, and now you want to go back in and add them, but the theme that you're building alongside of this for your own, not the demo that I'm showing you, go ahead and work with that at this point in the practice tags. I'd also suggest reading through the general template.php file. As we pointed out, there are some things in there that are not in the documentation. So at this point in your WordPress development education, it's important that you start reading through actual WordPress code. You may not understand everything if you don't know a lot about PHP, but just recognizing names and functions and things like that is important. So go ahead and do that practice, and then in the next lessons, we will look at navigation tags in more depth.